Well, hey folks, on behalf of Comestri, it's Ben Cook here, sitting down as part of the Big Commerce 360 Summit, their Crystal Ball edition, and I have the absolute privilege of sitting today with Patrick and Peter, who are friends, colleagues, peers, industry peers, whatever you would like to call them. I won't steal your thunder. It'd be good for you guys to introduce yourself and welcome to the panel. Patrick, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. It's good to be with Big Commerce and Comestri today. My name's Patrick Rechsteiner. I run a consulting business, and I specialize in digital strategy, transformation, and operations. I've got over a decade of experience across a number of different retailers, both within Australia and overseas. Brands like Myer, Shoes and Socks, Superdry, Cameo, Fashion Bunker, and the list goes on. Really excited to be part of the Crystal Ball Summit today, just because I really like how quickly and how sharply the industry is evolving. And it's really interesting to see some of those old school principles continue and so many new opportunities pop up at the pace they are. So really looking forward to discussing that with Peter and Ben today. Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Ratcliffe. I also run my own consulting firm with a very good friend and colleague of mine, Sam Bala. And basically, I have a very long history in retail, in IT and digital. So my last position was at Retail Apparel Group, where I set up the whole digital strategy for 6 brands. They got rid of 1 brand, so now it's 5 brands, but have a great time. I transitioned from IT to digital many years ago and have never looked back. And I'm looking forward to also speaking with everybody in this Big Commerce event.
Thanks, guys. Very much appreciated. I guess one of the things that, one of the reasons for inviting you both today is I am fascinated by your backgrounds, and both of you have been with big retailers, multi-brands, lots of stores, lots of tech, different brands in themselves within the organizations, and now you've both come into a consulting role. And I think, being the Crystal Ball edition, one of the things that I'm keen to understand is maybe if we sort of look at, if you're a mid-sized retailer and you're trying to grow, trying to scale nowadays in this world that we live in, how do you kind of start from a mid-sized perspective and maybe trying to emulate what you do from a large retail perspective, where you do have, lots of resources at your disposal. And then also maybe even if you're in an embryonic or a new business or an SMB retailer, or a small brand that's starting out, again, they're trying to get to that mid-market phase. So having both come from big retail, Peter, why don't you start? How do you think now as a consultant, you kind of, from the outside looking in, you'd work with a brand that's mid-market trying to grow to a large scale?
Look, as you say, I have come from a large retailer, but there's some disadvantages in being a large retailer as well, where you're actually held back by some of the systems that you already have in place. Small and mid-sized retailers can take advantage of that and look at new technology, or they've already bought technology that can scale up. And to me, look, I think the biggest thing I tell them is you've got to have a phased approach. Make sure you build the foundations properly, and then that will allow you to scale and grow. Don't just go in there, big bang, I need to do this now, without looking at building those foundations properly.
Yeah. And yourself, Patrick?
I think it's really interesting that that Peter's just dropped into the disadvantage of being really big and the incumbents. And it is something that is a feature of, I guess, the retail e-commerce space, but many different industries. I'm fortunate enough to work across a couple different industries now, and I see a similar phenomenon occurring. Yes, major players, and some more than others, do have incumbent positions, but also a smaller medium brand that's done really well is doing so because it's rewarding customers with something different.
Yes.
And that's often on the back of a product or a service that is innovative or newer or something different, whether it's a physical product or a SaaS piece of technology that's different. So the first thing I really encourage anyone, whether they're large or small, but it's easier if you're small, because there's just so many less people to get the message to, is to just really understand what you're great at. What is it that's special and that's winning with customers from your product? So that's the first thing I'd look at. And the second thing really is to understand, what phase am I in? If I'm in startup phase and I'm worrying about cash flow and where the next sale is coming from, it's very different than at least having some level of incumbency as a mid-marketer will. And then I'm probably looking at optimizing my current channels, maybe adding some new line extensions and different products, and maybe finding some new routes to market, whether that's an additional channel, whether it's a marketplace or a marketing channel, or whether it's an additional geography or territory. And I think it's really understanding where those two things come together. And one of the real key features of, like I said, is that size isn't the biggest thing, but it is that speed is the most important.
Mm-hmm.
So where technology can help you gain speed, as a smaller player, you are already a faster runner than many of the big guys. Not all of them. There are some big organizations that do speed and testing in the market really, really well.
Yeah.
And that's really where I would encourage a business of any size, but particularly those that are smaller, to focus on. They don't need to do what everyone else is doing great. They can do some of those, but they need to understand what works for them and how to get it out there fast.
And it's quite easy and much easier with SaaS technology, whereas in the larger retailers, they never had that initially when they started. So the smaller retailers have a much bigger advantage.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Peter. I mean, at the end of the day, big organizations now are still a bit hamstrung with on-prem solutions, big sort of, data banks and monolithic systems of the past. Whereas in that mid-market space where you can, ideally choose a SaaS-based system, turn it on and get into a proof of concept much, much quicker, you'd hope for a faster ROI. So I guess, to sort of respond to that a little bit, if you're a mid-market, you still hopefully you've got some cash, you've got some brand equity, you're trying to scale, you can choose channels, you can get there maybe a bit more nimble. What about if you're a smaller retailer and you've got to then start to think, right, where am I going to put my dollar and what am I going to back it with? Any thoughts on that, Patrick?
I think I'm going to continue from what I was saying before about knowing who you are and what you're good at. Especially a lot of smaller brands probably have people who are more on the product or creative side who've come up with something, or if we're talking in the tech world, a little bit more of a technical side. I think brands like that would do really, really well to become a little bit more familiar with just the general framework for which their customers are loving what they're doing and following those channels. For instance, if we start noticing in our analytics with a small brand that all of a sudden someone from New Zealand or the UK are starting to pick up our products, well, that tells us really quickly, we can follow the bouncing ball, that there's probably a really low cost, easier to win at option in different geographies. The same thing happens with different marketing channels. So I think the trick with a brand like that is to start testing and trying some of those different bits and pieces and following the data as it goes. But always to remember that you don't have to do everything. A small brand, an entrepreneur can't do everything. And they get in trouble when they try and do a little bit of everything. If we stay great at what works for us and focus on the channels that are showing wins and doubling down on those, that's the best place. And in order to do that, you also have to be willing to shut down some of the things that aren't working. There's no need to go open a store in London if no one in the UK is buying from your website. It's probably the wrong thing. And I see that's a really obvious example, but I see that type of thing happening quite often with smaller brands trying to do too much of too many things without doing them well.
And do you see, Patrick, the facilities in play nowadays to be able to do that? Whether it's a store, a marketplace, Instagram, these kind of areas where you can sort of test the market with your brand and your sort of brand association?
Yeah, absolutely. So both from a go-to-market perspective, which lets, marketing to customers, whether it's Instagram or digital ads or traditional media, which we should not forget about, is just so powerful still for some brands, whatever that market is. There are so many opportunities to turn things off and on and test quickly there. But also from a retail perspective, so an actual physical sales channel. There are drop shipping arrangements available all over the world for you to locate your product. There are many different fulfillment methods or marketplaces out there to both get the product sold to a customer on the channel and also fulfilled to the customer via the logistics network. I think the key is understanding that if something isn't working, it's strategically foolish to keep banging your head against the same wall. It's better off to acknowledge that part as a test that came out negative and go focus on trying another route to market. And that's where technology can really help you get those things up and down quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Peter, anything to add? I mean, you're in that consulting space now. You get to look inside of a few businesses. Must be pretty interesting.
Yeah, look, I agree with Patrick. You've got to do what you do well. Focus on those things. But the beauty of digital and tech now is that you can very quickly try things. And if they work, you can keep going and grow on them. But you can quickly turn things off that aren't working. And really, we get customers to focus on their analytics as well, and make sure, have a look and see where your customers are, what they're buying, what they're doing, how we're going to increase conversion rates. And some things may look great on the outset, but really do your return on investment calcs, because some of them just won't work out. Don't offer free delivery if it's going to cost you $15 every time something, if you're going to send something that's very lightweight, but it's still going to cost you $15. That's $15 off your bottom line. So, you've got to do those calculations to make sure what you're doing is actually going to make you money and not send you broke.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to jump in there, Ben. Peter, I love that you brought that up, because one of the other things I see smaller businesses make the mistake of is chasing top line sales without profitably growing their business.
Yeah.
Sales do not grow you a business, profit does.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about growing at speed, if you have a strong ROI model, let's say, for instance, in your digital marketing, right? If your margins are strong enough that you get a very strong return on ad spend, well, then that's a great place to generate more profit for your business, far better than other places. And that equation is different for different brands.
Yep.
And you really need to follow that. I don't want a $20 million business that makes me $1 every year.
No.
It's not. And it sounds so simple, but there's so many small businesses that forget about that simple, basic rule.
Yeah. Oh, we've got to offer free shipping. We just got to do it. And I say, hold on a minute. You've really got to step back. How much is this going to cost? So, and you're exactly right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did once work with an organization and they got all excited about selling coffee machines to New Zealand from Australia until they realized what the freight bill was going to be.
I remember having a record sales month. It was one of my first months with a brand that I worked with, and we celebrated and everything else. And then 2 weeks later, I saw the P&L.
Yeah.
And it was anything but a record profit month. And that's the sort of misalignment that can hurt you, probably not in the short run, but that can really hurt you in the long run. And
absolutely.
Working with you, they don't understand that fundamentally. That's a big challenge.
And I guess nowadays, especially with the balance, I guess, of the amount of money you can spend on digital spend and digital advertising, there are some phenomenal budgets nowadays to try and win the eye of the consumer. Patrick, have you found that you've kind of really got to balance, when you talk about P&L, there's one thing selling product and everyone's going crazy, but, if you've just spent, all of your money or all your revenue, all your profit on digital marketing, how do you kind of balance that up over the course of the month if you're doing month-end reporting?
Well, look, I'm fortunate. I have my first career outside of uni wasn't in digital, wasn't in retail, wasn't even in marketing. It was in corporate finance. So I'm a nerdy accountant at heart. And so I've always balanced all of my digital marketing data with a very, very strong commercial side. And I think that's absolutely paramount. CFO is only going to sign off budgets if it's profitable at the end of every month. And that is a language that every marketer or e-commerce professional needs to learn to understand. And it is incumbent on the marketers to understand how to speak finance, not the other way around. And I think that is a big gap, actually, in the skill set of a number of e-commerce and digital professionals. And it's a particular one that brands who are engaging with agencies need to be aware of. Some agencies are very good at speaking that language and inherently understand it. Other ones will lead you down the vicious cycle of throwing more money down at a decreasing return. And it's a challenging one. So I just think it's about the data, but it's about not just thinking return on sales, ad spend data. It's about a more nuanced and holistic approach across the business. Managed correctly, that vicious diminishing return cycle can become a virtuous cycle on the way up that just keeps kicking in more profitable marketing spend and generating extraordinarily rapid growth. And that's another potential of the world we find ourselves in today, that you can really accelerate your growth fast. And that's true for big organizations as well.
Yeah, for sure. Going to change tack a little bit because I do want to play with both of these backgrounds of you guys, where you've come from, internal to now external, and just talk a little bit about, tech platforms on the one hand and the investment in technology. And, we're in the tech business, so happy days, may long that continue. But then also people and processes is often, not necessarily recognized. Internal change, risk, change management, et cetera, And I'm interested in both your thoughts on the difference between, whether you find that a little bit easier now you're on the external than when you were on the internal. Peter.
Oh, look, I think people and process is always a major issue with any tech, especially when at the moment there's such a high turnover in digital all around the country, people moving across companies all the time. I think the biggest thing is, you've got to look at the tech, but you've got to spend that extra time in making sure that the processes are going to make that tech work. A lot of people just quick, I've got to put this system in and I've got to put that system in without little thought of, if you were putting an order management system in place for click and collect, is my inventory correct? How do my store people, understand how this all works? How are they going to cope with when there's customers in the store and having to go and pick orders for click and collect or store to door? So a lot will just throw the tech at the staff, but others will actually utilize the whole process and aim to make it work by ensuring that the processes are in place to make that tech work and get the true return on investment on the tech. But some don't have the staff to do that either. So you've just got to, but there's no point in throwing tech at it, because if the process and the people aren't right, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. Often tech can get blamed, but sometimes it's the analysis of people and process.
Oh, absolutely.
Patrick, are you saying the same?
Yeah, I think this is a really common issue in businesses. I think, look, I wrote something down actually. I wrote, what did I write? Many organizations, particularly from the top level, they know a huge amount from the executive level about what the tech should do or what the potential in the tech is.
Yeah, more the potential.
The potential is key, and I'll come back to that, but they don't know how well we as an organization are utilizing our tech. Many times we'll say, hey, we have this email platform, we need a new email platform. This one doesn't do it. And when you look under the hood, less than 20% of the functionality of that platform is currently being utilized, even though 100% of it's being paid for. That is like having a store open 20% of its trading hours. Would you ever do that? But that's a really, really common thing. Also, there's a huge amount of focus on the people, individual people in an organization, from recruitment to management, to taking care of them, to making sure they're engaged and developed and promoted and everything. There's far less effort being done by most organizations on the process through which those people work together on. And in e-commerce, you have a very multifaceted world where, from product to customer-facing technology to back-end technology to content to design to paid marketing and unpaid marketing, it all has to work together in a bit of a synergistic dance. And process might sound like a boring term, but it's really how well are our people going to work together to serve our customers. And I don't think there's enough executive level attention paid to that. And it's not hard. It doesn't take very long. Once you nail good processes, then you train them. Done. But the amount of effort spent between the lines, from senior to middle to frontline workers, when processes aren't very strong, is another huge underutilization of people's efforts. Let alone the inefficiencies. But then complain and talk about it. The system doesn't work. Pragmatically, it's a massive issue. I don't think anyone's worked out a model yet for how to quantify that.
No.
It'd be a smart person and a rich person that could figure that out, because that is a huge, huge sink, and one that is probably one of the reasons for incumbents becoming slower and more bureaucratic, because there's lack of processes. There's more nodes in the pie, so therefore, you know, things like that become a bigger issue.
Yeah, and if they don't do change management properly and process management, I mean, it will always be the tech's fault no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, a poor builder blames his tools, right?
That's right.
Now, yes, you can get better tools, but you better know how to utilize that tool, right?
Absolutely.
If I buy a Ferrari engine and drop it into my car, but I put it into the boot, it's not helping me very much, is it?
No.
It's literally that simple.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's just the unsexy thing and the not fun thing to talk about. But this is, you know, this is a people and culture issue as much as it is a customer issue, as much as it is a tech issue. Because people become frustrated by poor tools, and customers then get poorer experiences. So it really is, again, it's these technology issues, or these technology, you know, the things that we speak about, digital is so wide in organizations now that these become issues that impact every silo, or every, you know, doesn't matter how you're set up, every function of the business. And they deserve, you know, executive level attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you know, just to pick a couple of examples in that, you know, we talk in the industry a lot about customer experience. We talk in the industry a lot about unified commerce. You know, when you guys go into organizations nowadays, do you see that properly aligned from, you know, sales channels all the way through to fulfillment, customer service, returns, refunds? You know, that whole concept, like you mentioned then, Patrick, you know, that's all about the dance within the organization. You know, are there processes that are aligned to those facets of unified commerce / customer experience, or whatever they may be, that an organization is, you know, doubling down on?
I mean, for me, it's a mixed bag, but if you can win at that, every function of your business operates better, every single one.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had it where, you know, all they want to do is put in click and collect. And the first question I ask is, do you actually know what stock is in your stores? Do you have inventory accuracy? Oh, no. And I said, well, how are you going to provide a great customer experience when that customer goes in to pick up his product and it's not there? You know, and then I have another business that we're working with, and we showed them the functionality within their current system that it can absolutely do click and collect store to door. And the business turned around and said, fine, now we know that the technology can do it. We have to work out our processes. We have to work out, we're going to start having workshops on how returns are going to work, how, you know, how pickup and store to door is going to work before we even turn this technology on. And they're doing it absolutely the right way.
Yeah. I always find there's a few what if scenarios in there as well. If we don't have product, where are we going to get product? When's that going to come? What's the promise back to the customer? Who's going to communicate with the customer? And, you know, those things have changed. You know, there's a lot that kind of goes into that, let alone reverse logistics, right? Which you know, one-way logistics is quite easy, but reverse
exactly.
a lot harder.
You can never forget return.
No.
That's right.
So given, you know, we're talking about internal tech stacks, then, you know, what importance do you think organizations, you know, of different shapes and sizes should play on that kind of technology audit, or that internal audit of their own tech, and then kind of wrapping that around with, you know, people and process? Peter.
Look, you know, it depends on the size of the business. You know, quite often you can do an audit of their tech stack and they say, well, we're stuck with the ERP, so work around it. You know, so then you have to go and try and find some middleware to be able to get some data from one system to the other. And then, you know, that adds a failure point to it as well. You know, so, and then there's others who have a great tech stack and don't have the skills or processes in place to be able to use it properly. So, and then you walk in and you think, wow, you know, you've actually got everything in place here, but nobody knows how to use the system. So, so there's a mixed bag all over the place.
Yeah. And Patrick, you know, do you often see that, you know, you talk about attention to detail in terms of, you know, bringing people in, and the amount of investment goes into hiring processes, you know, is the same amount of investment going into training people within the business on the technology that arises within the business, or are we sort of, you know, too busy doing our jobs?
It's often one of those things. Well, I mean, it should be part of our jobs, right? I mean, there's you know, the Ferrari example, right? No one knows how to drive that car.
Yeah.
point, right? Looks pretty in the garage. But look, I think that they're on average, and again, some businesses are very good about this. On average, it's not scoped properly into the timelines or into the cost. It's thought about as the part, if the project's getting expensive, it's the part that we can just do without. And what I often think is, I think this is incumbent on both people who are implementing technology and the people who are making the decisions within a project. Sometimes you get someone expensive and big to implement the technology, they can often go with the training costs. It's the size of the implementation cost, so that just doesn't feel right. I think we're far better off. This is where I think it is a people and culture issue, and a workforce development issue, to get people utilizing that new technology and to get people from across the business onto the technology sooner and involved in it. And I think there are clever, lower cost, more, using a bit more of a lateral mind about what's important to our organization, or organizations. There are ways of training and implementing in a much better manner and doing it on an ongoing manner. Sometimes and that's just got to be, in my view, a bigger part of the conversation, as opposed to necessarily a huge incremental cost. It just needs to be part of what we recognize is important to do.
Yeah. All right. So look, I'm conscious of time. So yeah, I guess, looking at this then as a crystal ball edition, we've talked a little about trying to take advantage, trying to be nimble, trying to use technology to back that up, maybe looking at people and process, current tech stack, new tech stack, etc. Yeah, there's quite a lot in that, I guess, without actually looking at the market themselves. But I'm going to ask you, I'm always keen that these sessions, give organizations or people, something to take away. So, to ask a reasonably simple question that may be challenging to answer, what would be, Patrick, in your opinion, 5 quick wins that you would say to an organization? We're in March, right? 2021, is upon us. FY22 is close. What would be 5 things that you could do maybe in the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks to improve your position for this year?
Okay, so the first one, number 1 is audit your data model, your data framework. Is my data centralized? Is it clean? Is it easy to access? It's really, where do I get it from? Where do I store it? And how do I utilize it? That is the framework. That is the central nervous system, wherever that sits, that all new tech is going to feed into and plug into and come in and out of. That might be a really long project to actually fix if you've got massive issues there, but do an audit fast. And in that audit, include what is our strategy on first-party data. This is going to be a very, very big topic and significantly enhance or limit our marketing opportunities in the next 6, 12 months and beyond. There are a number of privacy things coming in for the right reasons, but they will impact digital marketing strategy. So that's number 1. Data model, including first data. Get an audit going. Second one is focus on speed. Can we quickly get things up and get them off, or do we have an issue there? Can we just plug into another marketplace with our existing product data or not? Where are we at from speed? Make that a key KPI. We don't have to do it every month. Yeah, but once a year, once every 6 months, we should be looking at how quickly can we get new digital projects up and down and what that means. Number 3, revisit your strategy. And by that, I don't mean what your strategy is. I mean your definition of strategy. If a corporate strategy has more than 5 high-level points, it's too complicated for your business to understand. If a brand strategy has more than 3 points of difference with its communication, you're never going to be able to communicate that in a crowded marketplace. Revisit what you know of and how you define strategy within your organization to simplify it. The strategy is based as much on what it is as to what the things you say no to, and that's a big issue sometimes. Number 4, people and processes are a customer experience, a people and culture experience, a people and culture issue, a finance issue, all of these things. Please treat them as such. And number 5, I'm particularly passionate about this one. Think globally, even as a small Aussie brand. As you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from Canada. I'm not from these shores. Australians often think too small and that we cannot compete on the global scale. You are wrong. You can compete. Your products are just as good, if not better. Really, in the world of Olympic sport, we really have a crack. In the world of retail e-commerce, we need to have the same level of crack because we have the capability. Sometimes we just don't have the belief.
Thanks, Patrick. Some great insight there. Yeah, my mind plays back to the press over the last couple of days with the Buy Aussie Now marketplace that's just come up, which I think is pretty interesting. That's promoting 100% Australian brands. Peter, keen for your top 5, mate.
Mate, a lot of them are, a lot of very similar. Look, I think the biggest thing is at the moment, quickly invest in CX. Look at your customer experience online. How are you going to make that journey easier? Make it seamless and easy. Make the same experience across all of your touch points, and really focus on conversion. There's a lot of websites out there that just don't cut it in customer journey. It's all too difficult, and people just drop off. So have a look at it. Look at your customer journey. Do some A/B testing. Make sure that you get that customer experience right across all the channels. Secondly, look, along with Patrick, audit your data, check your data. You've really got to try and get this 360 view of your customer. You want to know where they're buying, what they're doing, everything to do with your site or your business, and use AI where you can to get control, get insights, because you're not going to have the manpower to analyze all this data. Let's get some AI technology in place to see what your customers are doing, make recommendations as to what they are actually looking for. So, involve AI. I think, I heard a saying the other day that AI it's no longer artificial, it's beneficial. So maybe we should call it, BI. But, and I think it's true. It makes it so much easier in all aspects of on-site experience, insights, and for when you're segmenting your database, targeting and personalization. Utilize some AI technology. Focus on loyalty. Loyalty is not all about discounts. You've got to value add, do some value added services with your customers. It's a lot better, cheaper, and easier to keep your current customers than just trying to acquire new ones all the time. If you can increase the customer lifetime value of existing customers, it's going to be far more beneficial than going out there all the time, and the cost of acquisition is just getting higher and higher. I think one of the biggest things is going to be marketplaces this year. You've got to get your products out to as many customers as possible. And along with what Patrick said, you've got to make sure that it is easy to hop onto these marketplace channels. But if you're not doing it, sure as your competitor is going to be doing it. So you've got to get your customer out there. Another easy one would be mobile. I think mobile purchasing is just still growing. So you've got to make sure that your website is optimized for mobile. Payment choices. You now see so many people out there, so many websites that have 10, 12, 15 different types of buy now, pay later, and then you've got your standard PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, and so on. There's got to be technology out there that can actually help you or help the customer choose what is right for them, and make it much more easier to integrate. People want lots of choices, so we've got to look at somehow, looking at a quick way to you don't want a whole page that's got a whole page of buy now, pay later options. And I think another one is sustainability. You've really got to look at your core focus on sustainability. Customers are becoming more aware about protecting the planet, and they are purchasing from companies who have policies and procedures around sustainability and recycling and so on. So you've got to look at that green side of your business as well, and make sure that you are doing what you need to do to keep your customers happy and the world a better place.
Yeah, that's a really interesting last point, Peter. I think even if you're not kind of writing that all over your products, just what your brand represents, right. Almost publication of your own policies within a brand, I think are becoming ever more important nowadays. Yeah. Look, fellas, it's always an absolute pleasure to talk to you both. Patrick, I haven't managed to get down to Melbourne and see you, mate, for almost 12 months now, but I can't wait till I do. Peter, always a pleasure to catch up. And guys, I can't thank you enough on behalf of Comestri and the Big Commerce 360 Summit. So I think it's been a great panel, great discussion. Really appreciate your time, guys.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers, guys. Thanks, Peter.
See ya.
Take care. Cheers.